with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee. David Tulis.
The National Education Association, the NEA, was created many decades ago in the 1920s to secure the national establishment's thinking of behaviorism, evolutionism, progressivism into the teaching guild, the teaching class, and thereby control what people think in the hinterlands, places such as Chattanooga, Tennessee, Hamilton County. In Tennessee, there is a teachers union called the TEA, the Tennessee Education Association, which has a similar perspective, which is to say progressive, collectivist, evolutionary, and very, very modern, which would hold to, we could say, relativistic theory of morality, and the idea that the individual should be subsumed in the group. And of course, that all those kinds of ideas are dangerous and damaging to the family and to the individual student who is a subject of the member of the NEA or the TEA. Now, in Tennessee, there's grown in the past years a separate organization in a kind of a contest for membership among public school teachers here in Chattanooga and across the state, and that is the Professional Educators of Tennessee, PET for short. And we have with us here the man who started it and the man who's at the head of this organization that has thousands of members and is growing as against the TEA, which J.C. Bowman tells us is losing membership. J.C. Bowman, tell us just briefly what about PET and how it's in a kind of struggle for membership among public school teachers in Tennessee.
Well, it's been a fight, David. I appreciate you having me, number one. I want to thank you for that. Bo Watson may take me to task for the guy with the bow tie. I wanted to point that out. For Professional Educators of Tennessee, we're a statewide professional association, and we represent teachers that are in the public school sector. We also have some charter school members. We have some members that also maybe in some private schools. But for the most part, 95, 98, 99% of our membership is in the public school sector. And so as we go statewide, we are a competitor in a way to the union. Our primary mission is to create a quality education experience, safe environment for our students. Education achievement of children in our state is established as part of our core principles when we started in 1979, and we're still operated by the same principles today. So, I mean, I could go on and tell you things, but
go ahead. Tell my listener,
obviously.
Tell my listener why, J.C. Bowman, tell my listener why the teacher in Chattanooga should consider PET. What are some of the main benefits that are ones that you would offer in contrast to benefits in membership with the TEA, the Tennessee Education Association, the establishment group?
Well, number one, teachers are concerned with liability. That's the number one issue. And we offer $2 million liability versus $1 million versus liability that the TEA offers. Second thing is professional development. Our professional development is second to none. We really have a incredible professional development system that we've established that you can do online. A lot of the portals. We host our annual conference webinar, which is focused on what members tell us that they need. This particular year was focused on special education. So that's based on when we survey our members, they tell us what they're looking for, and we do that. And obviously, member benefits. I mean, they're looking at things. We offer thousands of member benefits from whatever kind of long-term health care to whatever additional thing that you would find traditionally, and we get them at a reduced rate for our members. So anything that a union can offer, our association, which by the way we are an association, we are a 501c6, which is they are an association, and they are a 501c5, which means they engage in endorsing political candidates and contributing money to political candidates, which is something we simply will not and do not do.
Now, you said that the origins of PET, Professional Educators of Tennessee, was initially among conservative-minded people. Tell us a little bit about the founding, how those teachers that objected to the left-wing politics of the TEA and the NEA coalesced around your efforts, and then what happened in the years since seems to have become maybe more moderate in its outlook. Your group.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things back in the early days that really pushed us was we opposed compulsory unionism, which means in order to teach, you would have to join a union. We found that to be, we don't think that's a very good thing. You should have the right to be a member of a union or not be a member of a union, or be a member of an association or not be a member of an association, but it's your choice. So we believe in freedom of choice when it comes to that. So we're opposing compulsory unionism. At the time, you probably remember this, David, probably in the late 70s, early 80s, strikes were the key buzzword. So we opposed teacher strikes because we thought that they were harmful to children. Tennessee has subsequently put it in the law that you cannot strike. The purpose of why we exist, I mean, is a public education system, which is, by the way, in the Tennessee Constitution. So it's a legitimate role of government. But the one thing that you've got to look at is that, we exist for the purpose of educating children. And if you're going to come along and strike, you're interrupting the education of children. So part of that, and then we got into the social issues, obviously, which we simply do not get engaged in. A lot of people were upset about things that were non-educational. And so we purposely chose not to participate in those.
Yeah,
our members
don't
want social media. I mean, social issues or get us involved in that.
Right. So, for example, pro-life, you don't have a position on that.
Well, we take no position on abortion, pro-life, or pro-choice. On the other hand, I mean, we don't give money to it. I would say we have a lot of members that are pro-life, but again, it's just something we don't get involved in.
Now, the Tennessee Constitution, you were mentioning that is the state interest in public schools, and if you go by the Constitution, you have a point, and that is because Tennessee, the people of Tennessee, through the ratification of that compact with the state and with government, created a system of free public schools. It says the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards of a system of free public schools, and that the GA may establish and support such post-secondary institutions, including ones of higher learning, as it determines. Now, the question I want to ask you is about the three standards for public schools. What does your organization say about the requirement for eligibility standards of a system? How do you read that provision? Because it seems to me that part of the Constitution is not being respected, and that we have public schools in Tennessee that require the maintenance and support of the system, but there are no eligibility standards. Can you comment on that, J.C. Bowman of Professional Educators of Tennessee?
Well, that's a big question. We could spend all day just on that question alone. And at some point, you have federal law that intersects with that. Take the issue of illegal immigration, for example. In public schools, people fail to understand the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot, and I forget the case, the Plyer case, it's the Plyer, Plyer, you cannot ask the origin of where a student comes from. So you have no idea where they're from. You must accept all students. So in regard to that, you have to take every kid that comes into your door. And I was talking to a gubernatorial candidate the other day, and they were telling me they were going to stop illegal immigrants from public education. And I said, well, you're going to have to overturn that Supreme Court ruling. And they seemed surprised with that. So for us, it's simply, you're establishing at the age of when they enroll, which, we continue to push some of that back. Eventually we've moved to preschool and we've expanded back because we've discovered kids cannot read. Some kids don't even get a textbook in their hand or even a book in their hand, despite the best efforts of Dolly Parton and other people to mail them textbooks. So they don't get a textbook. They don't even get a book in their hands until they step foot into a school. So, they're starting behind. So, eligibility, it's a wide issue. Nobody's ever really focused on that. I call the term school readiness.
Well,
we haven't really measured that as an impact. Some kids are
the Tennessee Code annotated.
5. Some kids are not ready to go to school until they're 7. So, we may need to look at that at some point.
We're talking with J.C. Bowman here.
School readiness is still a current issue.
J.C. Bowman, well, let me just get back to this question. We have 3 requirements for the public school system. 2 seem to be honored. The maintenance, that's understood, is the payment the support. Those are very similar terms: maintenance, support. And then the third leg that defines the school system constitutionally is eligibility standards. Let me just get it from you. Are there eligibility standards for public education in Tennessee pursuant to that term in the Constitution? Yes or no? That's a yes or no question.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is.
Okay. So one could say that the system is open for litigation as being unconstitutional because it does not have eligibility standards, which would effectively now keep out students. If students cannot enter the public school willy-nilly, but have to meet a standard, that would be constitutional. But you're saying that would have to be litigated. Obviously, it has not been litigated.
Not to my knowledge. So, but I would argue that they would probably say to you that they're setting eligibility standards by setting the age requirement, but there is no mental or social capacity. Or character.
There are no character tests or references tests.
There's a residency requirement to the fact that you reside within the district that you attend for many districts. And some have intra-district transfers. You can go to other districts if you pay a small fee. But in most regards, if you reside within the school district, you're a certain age, and you've had basic vaccines and shots and whatever, at that point, then you were able to enroll in a public school.
All right, so you're offering what is essentially a very limited and weak definition of eligibility standards, but you're saying that the things you're mentioning do suffice as qualifying constitutionally as eligibility standards for the public school. So that's why there's been no litigation.
Yeah, I would say that would meet the requirement from that purpose.
Now, the members of your organization, do me a favor and tell me how many there are. We have you told me earlier that the TEA membership has gone by half in the past few years. Tell me about the enrollment with the TEA, and then tell my listener about the enrollment in your Teachers Association, the Professional Educators of Tennessee. What's happening with the numbers?
Well, we are growing, and part of the fact is that people are choosing not to affiliate with any organization. But in regards to the Teachers Association or Teachers Union, based upon numbers released by Mike Antonucci from, and if you don't know who Mike Antonucci is, he's a really good researcher who does work. He works for a thing called the Education Intelligence Agency, and he releases numbers on unions. He puts them somewhere between 24 and 27,000, where 5 years ago they were at about 53,000. So, their numbers are declining. Basically, in the last 5 years, we've jumped from 2,000 to about 8,000 something. And so somewhere between there, so we've grown. So we have acquired numerous members from there. We would like to think that we're retaining a lot of members and a lot of new growth from that area, but I don't necessarily think that they're leaving the union and joining us. We're also seeing a lot of turnover in teaching as well. So a lot of people are leaving the field.
Many of those who are part of your organization, J.C. Bowman, are sort of conservative bent. They're at least not doctrinaire liberals. Well, how do your members view the idea of a state cartel in education, which is what you're supplying people to that cartel? A cartel is a market player that has compulsion in some form of compulsion or coercion that keeps its market share. Public schools have been losing share to Christian schools and homeschooling for some time. How do conservatives who are in that profession square their favor of the marketplace with their actual occupation in a state monopoly?
Well, number one, I think I'm not sure that that's accurate. I think one of the things I would say to you, and I think the good argument would be, is that public schools have retained right at 90% of the talking about market share. They've retained 90%. 90% of kids in the state of Tennessee go to public schools. So the growth. I mean, while it continues to grow, the numbers of students continue to grow as well. So I think there's room for all to exist. I think parents are the first and foremost teacher of their child. I certainly have always supported that, but I also think that it's not feasible for people. And I had that argument with Harry Brown who wanted to abolish completely the public school system. And I said, well, where do you live? And he said, why? I said, because I want to make sure people know where to send their kids because they don't have anywhere to go. And maybe you can educate some of these children. I mean, in today's world, 2 parents work. And I think that in a lot of places, it's not feasible for everybody to homeschool their child. So 90% of the kids still are in public schools, 89.5% in the state. So, our members, and I think they do many of them come from a center right, maybe that's a better term for them, but they view it simply as they're educating and passing on the values to the next generation.
We're talking with J.C. Bowman, who oversees the Professional Educators of Tennessee, which is a teachers association group. And J.C., you have about 5,000 members. Is that
8,000?
8,000 members. Now, yeah. Let me ask another question about the institution of schooling per se. John Taylor Gatto is Teacher of the Year for New York City, New York State for several years running, but before he was fired, and he's an author of numerous books, including Underground History of American Education. And he says that there's the idea of a cartel is that you make supply rare and keeps costs high. It keeps a whole phalanx of supply, retail suppliers, wholesale suppliers in business, and it assumes certain things about the way the marketplace functions in education. Has not YouTube, has not the PDF effectively destroyed centralized educational systems which assume scarcity, whereas in those two, the PDF and the YouTube are the idea there is that knowledge, information, perspective, literature is easily available and virtually free. Why do we have to have a school system that your members support, which costs $10,000 a year or more per child, when many things are available for free by under self-government? J.C. Bowman.
Well, you think? I mean, here's the thing. First off, and I'm familiar with Gatto's work, but he hasn't been around in 20 years. So some of the arguments he makes are still, some of it could be valid, some of it could be argued. He was in a large urban system that was, and we still have problems with urban systems. But you see a lot of the smaller systems, particularly like in Chattanooga, the surrounding areas are doing incredible work with children. Tullahoma, right up the road from Chattanooga, is doing one of the most phenomenal jobs of any school district in the state. And you look at what's happening. Kids whose parents may not even have high school education are able to go on to college, get a master's degree, or even beyond. And it would not be feasible in a system that was not conducive to learning. I'm not saying it's a perfect system. It's well imperfect. But I don't think that it's a cartel. I certainly think that, when I think of cartel, I think of drugs. But I think of the regard to, a system where people are freely to be educated. I think that without it, what would happen? And so I think there's merits. I think it has to be local controlled. I think that we've got to make that argument that we need that parents and taxpayers and stakeholders need to be right there at the table controlling, and each community would look different.
Is there, J.C. Bowman, real quick question.
Values of that community.
All right, quick question, J.C. Is there real local control in public education, or is it just a phantasmagoria? In other words, an illusion, a mirage. Is there real local control?
And you raise a good question there. I would think that's the big argument right now. I concede your point to that. That what's happening is that because of all the federal laws that come down, and I'm for a limited role of federal government. I think they're a clearinghouse. They need to get out of some of the funding aspects of it, and we need to let our local controls. It's beginning to be. You're seeing more local control being pushed over. Particularly, I think the rebellion on Common Core was a good example of local control saying, wait a minute, we don't want that here in our state. And so it's going to be a tug of war. But I concede your point. I mean, to that effect, that when you have federal laws, federal court cases pushing down, telling people what they have and have to do, it's difficult to fight, at the local level.
J.C. Bowman, I want to thank you very much for joining us, J.C. Bowman.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for joining. And JC, tell my listener how to get a hold of your organization on the web. What's the website?
Sure, www.proedtn.org.
Proedtn.org. That's proedtn.org, and that gets my listener connected with the professional educators of Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
JC Bowman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
This is David Tulis. I've been talking with a non-left-wing teachers association that is gaining ground against the TEA, the Tennessee Education Association, which is supplies the teaching cartel, the school cartel, with staff people and insurance and various other things. And PET says it offers better options, better insurance, better liability, better professional development than the TEA, and is gaining ground at 8,000 members. This is David Tulis, Nooga Radio. Now I've got some important messages for you to hear. Hang on.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 12.